everybody, welcome up to the Vinyl Attic. We are recording this well after midnight because it is required for this album. Besides the fact it's a lot cooler at night, we are talking about a record that is a great late night record, I have to say. So, if you're just joining us, we're doing 100 albums that should be in your collection. 100 of the not so obvious albums that you should have in your vinyl collection. And we are talking about a record that I love so much. The Velvet Underground's third album from March 1969, titled The Velvet Underground. Not the first album, The Velvet Underground and Nico. This is The Velvet Underground with no Nico. This comes out and represents kind of an interesting shift in the band. Obviously, the first album with the banana peel and the Warhol cover is the classic, and everybody has to have that in their collection, and it's up in this room somewhere. And that's the record that shifts everything. All of a sudden, everybody's talking about the New York Underground and Andy Warhol and the Factory and avant-garde 60s. This record is a little bit different. So they do two albums as a quartet with John Cale. Velvet Underground and Nico and White Light, White Heat. And John Cale brings some kind of art sensibility to the band. I mean, he was a cello player, but he also was kind of tied into the avant-garde music world, and certainly he brought that kind of weirdness to the band. In 1968, after they'd done a little bit of touring, he leaves the Velvet Underground and is replaced by Doug Yule. Doug Yule is the new bass player for the band from Seattle. In fact, still lives up in Seattle, apparently. Doug Yule is a multi-instrumentalist. He's going to be playing more than bass. He's a little bit of a singer. And Lou brings him in. And there is a movement away from, in late 1968, from the New York Warhol Factory scene. I mean, the cover of this album is they're at the Factory. So it still has connections to New York. But it's recorded in Los Angeles. So dare I say it, the dark, heroin-themed music of 67 and 68, all of a sudden it has a little bit of sunshine in it. There's a little bit, I mean, who loves the sun? Not everyone. But there is a little bit of the sort of, maybe Brian Wilson peeping in through the window on this album. And some of that comes from Doug Yule, but some of it comes from Lou Reed, who wants to take the band in a new direction, maybe a little bit more commercial, a little bit more dialed back from the heavy avant-garde stuff from the first two albums, and create something a little bit more different. There's still plenty of, New York on this record. The opening track is Candy Says, which is a song about Candy Darling, one of the stars of Andy Warhol's stable, who is transgender. And the opening line in it is, I've learned to hate my body. It is now sort of like, oh yeah, that is a common journey that trans people go through. I just finished reading this book, Gender Queer, by Maya Kobabe. I bought it because it is the most banned book of the 21st century, and it's about their journey, trying to figure out what their gender is. And there's a lot of like, I hate my body, I hate my breast, I hate my menstrual cycle, I hate all these things that tie me to womanhood. That when I was reading it, I kept hearing Candy Says, the Velvet Underground song, because they were doing it way back in the late 60s, having this conversation about gender. And by the way, Candy shows up a little bit later, a few years later, in Lou Reed's classic Walk on the Wild Side. Candy pops up in that song as well. So, it immortalized in two great Lou Reed songs. There is multiple singers on this record. So he has Doug Yule sing Candy Says. His song Jesus is sort of Lou and Doug singing together. The album closes with Mo singing After Hours, which is a really great track. There's some amazing guitar playing from Sterling Morrison. It's very tender and, not the kind of hard rock and roll or just aggressive kind of proto-punk stuff from the first two records. And it is it's a little bit of a door opening. We've been talking about this a lot lately, to kind of the post-punk, more melodic music of the 80s. I know for a fact that this was a big influence on REM, on REM's style. And so there is this beauty of this record that you can come out of this darkness, out of this heavy drug-induced drugs, S&M, heroin, I mean, all this kind of stuff that was the focus on the first two records, and then come into the sunshine and sing about Jesus, and sing about love. I mean, there's love. What goes on in your mind? I know I'm feeling falling farther down. I mean, it's just, lady, be good, do what you should. I mean, there's just sort of this poppy, upbeat nature to this record that when you're coming out of the darkness of white light, white heat, all of a sudden feels like this beautiful opening of this flower. And it's just this beautiful record. Now, it still has some of that avant-garde element. There's a track on here called The Murder Mystery, and it is all four band members doing vocals, sort of doing counter poetry and counter melodies, and it's just very cacophonous, and so it almost feels like the ghost of John Cale is back on the record with that one, because it's a little weird in a fun way. Although apparently Lou Reed didn't like it very much. When this record comes out, the intent was to find a more commercial avenue for the Velvet Underground to be in, and it just bombed. It didn't even make the top 200 on the Billboard charts. It's just nobody knew what to do with it. It didn't get a lot of promotion, and it just sort of tanked. The follow-up record, Loaded, which has the classics Sweet Jane and Rock and Roll on it, did much better and kind of brought the Velvet Underground to a much wider audience. And that ended up being the last Velvet Underground with the original people in it. Doug Yule in 1973 put out a Velvet Underground record that was really just a Doug Yule record with Velvet Underground on it. That is actually a pretty cool record, but it's not a Velvet Underground record. The sort of popularity of this band was always very localized. I mean, they never really broke out. It's only years later that people start talking about the Velvet Underground. That in the 70s, when Lou Reed starts to become more popular, people are like, well, wasn't he in this weird little band that Warhol produced called the Velvet Underground? And then, gradually, the Velvet Underground starts to gain this wider audience. And they start selling more records in the early 80s than they ever did in the 1960s when they were out. They just become this sort of niche thing that you got to have in your record collection. I certainly, in the early 80s, is like, I need to get my hands on some of these Velvet Underground records because I love Lou Reed. He had some good records on the radio, so you had to kind of go down and track it down, and then, discover all this crazy music that they put out. But at the time, nobody was really listening to it outside of, the weird underground music scene. So I wanted to talk about this record because it is it's kind of a lost gem. People love the first record. They like the second record because of, the title track, White Light, White Heat, because Lou Reed always played that, throughout his career. They love Loaded because Sweet Jane is such a great song on the radio. And this record is this beautiful little gift in the middle that offers this positivity. I mean, he's singing about Jesus, and not in a religious way. Help me find my proper place. This really beautiful music that came out of all this noise, so it's worth paying attention to. So if you don't have Velvet Underground 1969, when they were on MGM Records, find it. It's a beautiful record. It's a beautiful record. I love it. Okay. So next time we're going to talk about a record that's totally forgotten, and it was such a great record when it came out, and it had such a kind of committed bunch of followers. We're going to talk about Graham Parker and the Rumors squeezing out Sparks, and how important that record was, and why that record is worth having in your collection. Squeezing out Sparks next time. But in the meantime, late at night up here in the sweaty vinyl attic, we're going to say this, the Velvet Underground, hugely influential, right? I mean, you can't imagine the impact the Velvet Underground had on the music scene, and so many people who were like, oh, I can sing about the dark side. I can do that bohemian thing where you suffer and then you share that suffering with the world, and out of that suffering comes something beautiful. I mean, the trajectory of the Velvet Underground was followed by so many bands after them of saying that there can be beauty and musicality in noise. And then on this album, they come back to the music itself. These incredible melodies. Some Kind of Love. Oh my God, it's such a great track. So, Velvet Underground matters. This album matters. You matter. Let's talk about it.